So now continuing on to our next speaker, who is a native Californian, but Texan by choice. He's a husband, father, dog lover, and a man of faith who is currently an IT business architect for global projects. Today, we will hear about a life-changing experience he had during a very trying time for the world and what resulted from that. Here with a prayer, a button, a box, and a hug, please welcome Craig Smith.
Good morning. I'm excited to be here with you today. Before we get started, I need everyone to do me a favor. Can you please stand up? Was that difficult? For most of you, it probably wasn't. You didn't really have to think about it. Didn't require a lot of effort. You just stood up. For some of you, it may have been a little more challenging. Maybe it hurt or required a lot more effort. Some of you may have not been able to stand up at all. So what do you do when you don't have the strength or the ability to stand up on your own? You look around you. You look to those who have this strength, and they're willing to reach out and help lift you. You can go ahead and sit down. Thanks. So I want to tell you about an experience I had where I was unable to do anything on my own, and I was completely dependent upon the people around me for everything. In early August 2021, I got COVID, and I went to a standalone emergency hospital here in Houston. I was immediately admitted, placed on oxygen, and diagnosed with severe COVID pneumonia. Now, I was receiving great care, but my condition just drastically worsened. And within a few days, I was sedated, intubated, and placed on the ventilator. At this point, I was in a medically induced coma. And it became critical to get me out of that standalone emergency hospital and get into a hospital that actually had an ICU. So hospital staff, my wife Tammy, family, friends, coworkers, all began searching for a hospital that had an available ICU bed. But this was during a resurgence of COVID. All the hospitals were full. All the ICU beds were taken. There were patients in the halls, in wheelchairs. There was no room. The search extended beyond just Houston, throughout Texas. Everyone saying no, nothing was available. Extended throughout the U.S., Florida, California, Washington, D.C., Minnesota, Utah, with nothing available. Eventually, a hospital in Provo, Utah, was willing to accept me as a transfer patient. So a life flight plane was sent to Houston to come and pick me up. Tammy watched as I was taken and loaded into an ambulance, driven to an airport, and flown 1,400 miles away so I could get the care that I needed. She then made preparations and left our two younger teenage children in the care of our oldest son, who had just graduated from high school. And then 2 days later, she got on the plane to fly to Utah to be there at my side. I guess you could say that that was the beginning of my road to recovery, actually getting into a hospital with an ICU. But it was a rough road to recovery. It was bumpy, it was painful, it was difficult. It looked like 5.5 weeks in a coma, failing kidneys and dialysis, my right lung collapsing, having a tracheostomy, severe infections in my lungs and in my blood, 3.5 months on a ventilator, 3.5 months without the ability to speak, 4 months on a feeding tube, severely damaged lungs, needing to rebuild the strength so I could eventually stand and walk again, relearning how to safely swallow, my left lung collapsing, my heart stopping, and needing CPR to resuscitate me. Hours of physical, occupational, and speech therapy. Entering the hospital at 205 pounds and leaving 4.5 months later at 155 pounds. All before returning home on Christmas Eve, still on oxygen, still recovering, but home. Now, throughout this whole experience, Tammy was at my side. She'd come early in the morning, put on a gown, gloves, and a mask, and be there at my side all day, late into the evening. On nights or days when things were particularly bad, she wouldn't leave at all. She'd sleep there in the hospital in a chair or in a padded bench in the back of the room. She became my health advocate, my biggest cheerleader, my prayer buddy, my voice when I couldn't speak, my connection to the outside world and to my kids. I can't tell you what it meant to have her there at my side, helping me. Today, I'd like to share with you 4 specific experiences I had where people around me helped lift me in small but very meaningful ways. And my hope is that as I share these experiences with you, you'll be reminded of the power of small acts of kindness. And you'll feel impressed to more quickly act on those kind thoughts that come to your mind when you see someone struggling to stand. So I'd like to tell you about a prayer, a button, a box, and a hug. First, a prayer. Well, a prayer meeting, to be exact. So many people knew a little bit about my condition. Tammy was providing updates to my boss, who then, with Tammy's permission, was passing those along to friends and colleagues that were concerned about me. Several coworkers took the initiative to plan a special prayer meeting for me. So on September 22nd, hundreds of people gathered together here in the Horizon Auditorium or throughout the world over Zoom to unite their faith in prayer for me. This place is a special place for me because of what took place here. After being in a coma for 5.5 weeks, I woke up the day before that prayer meeting. I couldn't walk, I couldn't move, I couldn't talk, but I understood what was happening as Tammy dialed into Zoom and we watched and listened to people here taking turns praying for us. I don't remember who was here. I don't remember who prayed. I don't remember what they prayed for. But I will never forget the love and support that we felt and how much that helped lift us at a really difficult time. The second experience, a button. So at that same time, in those first few nights after I woke up, I had this wonderful nurse named Katie. She was so sweet. Katie, at the end of the day, she would come in and check on me, make sure everything was okay, flip out the lights, and leave me alone so I could sleep. But I couldn't sleep. You see, I was developing a growing anxiety because as she left me, I would sit there, lay there in bed, unable to move, unable to speak. I had lost all the strength and all of my fine motor skills, so I had no ability to reach down at my side and find the remote control and press the nurse call button in case anything happened. I had no way of getting anyone's attention. And that was causing a huge amount of anxiety for me. Now, Katie saw that I was struggling with that remote. So she went and searched the hospital and found a large nurse call button that was intended for stroke patients. It was big, had a single button, and it was really easy to press. Every time Katie would check on me before leaving, she would take my hand and lay it on top of that nurse call button. So I knew exactly where it was, and she made sure I had the ability to press it to get her attention. I don't think she had any idea how much that helped lift me at a time when I was struggling with a lot of anxiety. The third experience, a box. So I don't know the cause, whether it was the medication I was on or just being confined to a bed for so long, but I began to develop an extreme sensitivity to textures in my legs and in my feet. Anything that touched them was just incredibly irritating. It kind of felt like when you step out your front door barefoot and you step onto that doormat, and it's one of those doormats that has the bristles, and they're just poking you in the feet. It doesn't really hurt. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but as you move back and forth, it becomes more and more uncomfortable. Anything that touched my legs or my feet just became irritating. Having socks on my feet or simply having a sheet draped over my feet and legs drove me crazy. It was so grating. My nurse at the time sat and struggled to read my lips while I tried to communicate to her what I was feeling. Then she left, coming back not too long later with a box. She had taken a box, cut out the front, cut out the bottom, so that that box could be placed over the top of my feet and that the blankets and sheets could be draped over the top of the box. So the blankets could still protect my feet from the cold air, but they weren't actually touching my skin. Just simply doing that, it relieved so much discomfort that I was having at the time. The fourth experience was a hug from my physical therapist. So some combination of COVID, being in a coma, the lingering effects of the sedation and paralytic medication I was on, being constantly fevered, heavily damaged lungs, all contributed to a complete loss of my strength. Every day, physical or occupational therapists would come in, and while I laid there in bed, they would take my hand and move my arm back and forth while I struggled to offer as much resistance as I could. Then they would go around to the end of the bed, lift up my foot, and press against me while I struggled to push back. They were trying to help me rebuild my strength so I could eventually walk again. So I want to share a video with you of one of my physical therapists. His name is Brandon. And Brandon was helping me walk for the first time in 2.5 months. Now, the video that I'm going to share immediately picks up. So what you don't see is Brandon come up to the side of the bed and talk with me and tell me he's here. He's here for me, and he's going to help me. He's going to help me stand up, and he's not going to let go. And then Brandon reaches down, throws his arms around me, bear hugs me, and just stands up, holding on to me. Then he takes a few steps backwards, a few steps forward before setting me back on the bed.
Good job, hon.
Good job, man.
You did it.
Now, I can guarantee the majority of that work was done by Brandon, not by me. And you may not have noticed, but when I went to take that first step with my left foot, my leg buckled. But Brandon was holding on to me. and he wouldn't let me go. Now, these 4 experiences I shared with you, those small acts of kindness from those people, I don't think anyone would describe those as great or grand gestures. In fact, if you asked each of those individuals about what they did, they'd probably say it wasn't a big deal, or they were just doing their job. But I can tell you that it meant a great deal to me. Katie finding that large nurse call button helped alleviate my anxiety at a really difficult time. That nurse finding that box to place over my legs gave me just a little bit of relief from that discomfort that I was feeling. And Brandon reaching down, bear hugging me, and standing up with me helped me move just a few steps closer to recovery. And all the people that gathered here in the Horizon Auditorium to pray for me helped lift my faith and help support me at a really difficult time. There's power in our small actions. There's power in reaching out to help lift someone. Whether you can see a specific, obvious need, or you just know that someone's going through something difficult, please act on that first initial kind thought, because your small action might be the prayer, the button, the box, or the hug that makes all the difference to someone who's struggling to stand. Thank you.